We're just going to give a couple of seconds for everyone to join in as you connect with your audio. But thank you so much for joining us here today. We're very much looking forward to our last webinar of this series that we've been running now for the past couple of weeks. And to anyone who's joining us for the first time, welcome. And to those that are coming back, welcome back. I think we now have enough people joining us, so an official and warm welcome to everyone joining us here today for our final session on our webinar series on as part of the capacity training for ASEFYLS 2026 on anticipatory leadership, where today we'll be tackling the topic of futures thinking in practice. This series has been organized now for the past 6 weeks in collaboration with the Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies, as well as the Development Academy of the Philippines. And we're very excited to be here today and for all of you joining us here from all over Asia and Europe. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Linnea Rignell, and I work at the Education Department here at ASEF, specifically on our youth projects. And I have the honor of emceeing today's session before we hand over the floor to our moderator for the discussion and invite our speakers to share their contributions. But at this point, let me just give them a short, brief overview of what we have today ahead of us. We will begin with a short introduction from my side, just to share a little bit about what we do here at ASEF, and also a little bit more about this webinar series that we have conducted and setting it into its context. Before I hand over the floor to our moderator, Mr. Kent Elman Kadalin, who will be moderating the dialogue with our expert speakers today to share their insights and perspectives on how futures thinking is used in different contexts and in different sectors in practice, and also have a little bit of a dialogue on the different perspectives from Asia and Europe. And as we're joining us here for a webinar, we have an opportunity for you to engage with us and with our speakers today. And you can do so, as I see already a lot of you are doing, by using the chat function. Please feel free to introduce yourself, tell us where you're from, sectors that you're working in, and any interests that you have in this topic. But then we also encourage you all to submit your questions to our speaker throughout today's session. And you can do so by using the panel that will be displayed on your screen, either on your computer or your mobile device, where there is a Q&A function. You can click more if it's not directly visible on your screen. And there you can submit your questions, you can upvote others' questions, and also comment on each other's. So this way we can see which ones are the most burning questions that you have as a group, and we'll make sure that they are addressed with our speakers later. But we're very excited to have almost 70 participants joining us today from all over Asia and Europe. So we hope that there are as many questions that will come up also in the discussions later. But without further ado, let me just then take a moment to give you a little bit of an introduction to ASEF and what we do and the program. For those of you who might be joining us for the first time, or this is your first activity that you're engaging in with our organization. So as ASEF as an organization is an intergovernmental institution who works on strengthening cooperation and mutual understanding between Asia and Europe, as the name entails. And whilst I work in the Education Department and today's session falls under our scope, we also work under a number of different thematic areas, spanning from education to also culture, government and sustainable development, economy, public health, media, etc. All in an effort to bring together people from civil society, but then also to connect civil society with government officials in a way that influences the direction of the two regions as well, and to ensure that we're working towards global challenges together. And under our Education Department, but also in our organization, one of our flagship projects is the ASEF Young Leaders Summit. And it's a leadership program that works to strengthen leadership capacity of young leaders across the two regions, and really an opportunity for exchange, connection, and mutual learning. And as part of this program, we organize different projects every year. And this session today is part of our 2026 program, the ASEFYLS Capacity Training 2026, for which we have selected 95 young leaders to join us But we're also excited to have been given the space to open up these webinars for you to join more from all over the 2 regions and not only with our cohort. So thank you for those of you who found us in different avenues and also registered and joined us here today. And as the name entails, our webinar series on anticipatory leadership, this is our topic and focus of this year, where we focus on specifically the lens of human-centered leadership and human-centered future. It's a brand new topic for us, which is very exciting and why we are also happy to be organizing this webinar series to set the scene and to provide an introduction to our participants as well as the further 2 regions for you. And we see that these skills are needed for young leaders as we move towards a more technologically integrated society to still ensure that we remain human-centered in our approaches. So how can we incorporate this into our leadership and also into our day-to-day decisions and actions? So today's session hopes to provide you a bit of food for thought and inspiration as you also evolve in your leadership positions. And how can you then take these discussions here today and bring them back to your peers and also within your own networks for further and deeper discussions? So we've brought together a group of experts today, and you can also catch up on the recordings from our previous webinars and all of our contributions there to give you this perspective on anticipatory leadership and all the different avenues that they entail. But with that, I think I've spoken for long enough. And I would like to move over to the heart of today's session, which is our panel discussion and Q&A dialogue. So again, make sure that you submit questions throughout or anything that you have thoughts about, and we will have help also our moderator, Ken, to address them with our speakers today. So without further ado, allow me to introduce to you Mr. Kent Anman Catalin from the Development Academy of Philippines, who will be also introducing the rest of our speakers and moderating today's session. Kent, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Linnea. And of course, thank you again to ASEF for this opportunity to lead the discussion today. And I would also like to thank our Dean at the Development Academy of the Philippines Graduate School of Public Management, Dr. Lizanne Ferrante Calina, for her leadership and foresight in our country, which has really brought about this collaboration. And I would like to welcome everyone to the final session. So as Linnea said, throughout this webinar series, we have examined the leadership capacities required to engage with uncertainty, the tools used to explore alternative futures, and the ways foresight can be applied in different organizations. And this final session really brings those dimensions together by examining how futures thinking is practiced within professional settings and actual institutions in Asia and Europe. So unlike our previous sessions, which focused on a keynote presentation, today's session will really be more of a discussion base, and we'll spend our time exchanging ideas, asking questions, and sharing experiences. So we encourage all of you later to participate and contribute your perspectives to make our interactions a meaningful conversation. So today's discussion will really focus on what happens after an institution decides that foresight is valuable. So how is it organized, who participates, and how are foresight findings translated into decisions? So by drawing from these different contexts and experiences, our aim really is to surface practical lessons for organizations, which maybe some of you are leading, so that you develop, deepen, and institutionalize strategic foresight and futures thinking. And with that, allow me to introduce our very esteemed panelists today. So first, we have Mr. Luke Tay. He leads Cornucopia, a Singapore-based global foresight and strategy practice focused on geoeconomic and climate resilience, sustainable development, and cross-sector collaboration. His work spans key domains, including food, energy, water systems, health and nutrition, smart cities, and critical supply chains. Through keynotes, international workshops, learning journeys, and advisory engagements, he supports organizations in navigating complex spatial shifts and VUCA environments, delivering innovations, resilient strategies, and greater strategic optionality. A recognized thought leader in horizon scanning, scenario planning, and organizational futures readiness, Luke has contributed to publications on global food and water security, geopolitics, carbon markets, and sustainability, and advises on cross-border partnerships and investments across ASEAN and the Global South. He is also a member of the Association of Professional Futurists and is active in several global and regional networks. Prior to founding Cornucopia, he spent 2 decades in leadership roles within the Singapore Public Service across agri-food and transport, covering policy, strategy, foresight, infrastructure, and governance. He has also contributed extensively to community and civic initiatives and was awarded the Public Service Medal in 2023. A historian and political scientist by training, Luke was an Economic Development Board scholar and graduated summa cum laude from the University of Pennsylvania. Again, everyone help me welcome Mr. Luke Tang. Luke, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, guys. Well, that's a lot. Yeah, okay, thank you. Yep.
Our second panelist is Mr. Rushdi Abdul Rahim. He is the President and Chief Executive Officer at the Malaysian Industry Government Group for High Technology, or MITE. It's a policy think tank under the Prime Minister's Department and Director of My Foresight, the Malaysian Foresight Institute. He leads national foresight, trend and horizon scanning initiatives, working with the public and private sector organizations to explore emerging disruptions and their long-term implications. His work focuses on strengthening strategic anticipation and enabling institutions to better prepare for future challenges. Rushdie has led major foresight projects shaping Malaysia's national policies, including youth-defined Shape the Future, Future Rail 2030, the Future of Malaysian Public Service with UNDP and JPA, and the Future of Work. He also played a key role in developing Malaysia's Industry 4 WRD framework and the National Anti-Corruption Plan, and co-chaired the NSRC Working Committee on Technology Prioritization for R&D. He has been recognized internationally as one of the 25 featured futurists in Leading Thoughts, How to Use a Futurist. Again, everyone help me welcome Mr. Rushdi Abdul Rahim. Rushdi, welcome to the panel. Thank you so much for being with us. Our third speaker is Ms. Tia Danilov. She's the head of the Foresight Center at the Estonian Parliament. She has built up the center since its establishment under the Foresight Act in 2016. Tia's mission is to apply a balanced approach to foresight, open-minded and diverse to broaden horizons, while remaining grounded and connecting alternative futures to current realities. Previously, Teo worked at the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Communications and at Enterprise Estonia on topics related to entrepreneurship, exports, innovation, and the development of the EU international market. She holds a master's degree in economics from the University of Tartu and an Master in Engineering degree in Digital Transformation Management from Thai Tech. Currently, she's pursuing a PhD at the Ragnar Nooks Department of Innovation and Governance at TARTEC, where her research focuses on the role of foresight in enhancing the legitimacy of policymaking. Again, help me welcome Ms. Tia Danilov. Ms. Tia, welcome to the panel. And lastly, we have Mr. Karsten Beck. He has been working with trend analysis and scenario processes at the Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies, or CIFS, for more than 30 years in more than 30 countries. He is the head of presentations and keynote at the Institute and currently a director and futurist at CIFS. Karsten has an extensive experience as a presenter from doing more than 1,000 presentations globally during his professional life, spanning from global conferences to smaller groups in all types of organizations. The themes Karsten has been working with all relate to how global and local trends shape the futures for organizations, companies, and societies. Karsten has done scenario processes in retail, HR, finance, business-to-business, governments, and NGOs. His key priority is how to drive processes for clients in order for them to prepare for the future. These clients include organizations in global retail, governments, industrial conglomerates, cultural organizations, rock festivals, tourist organizations, the transport industry, IT, and more. Karsten is a Master of Science in Political Economy graduate from the Copenhagen University, where he joined the Institute in 1990. Again, Mr. Karsten, welcome back to our webinar series.
Thank you.
All right, so just to get the ball rolling, of course, we had your introductions, but from your perspective, could you also briefly introduce yourself, the work that you do in your organization, and what your organization does in relation to foresight and futures thinking? So I guess we start with Rushdie, then Luke, then Taya, and then Karsten. Rushdie, go ahead.
Yep. Hello. As introduced just now, my name is Rushdie. I head the organization called MIGHT, Malaysian Industry Government Group for High Technology. The acronym is known as MIGHT. We use a lot of foresight and future studies in our work because due to the fact that one of our main function is to provide advice to the government in terms of technology development, either through policy intervention or through policy advice. The use of foresight and might a bit multi-pronged. In general, foresight are used in might to facilitate identify future opportunities, barriers, and risks with regards to what we're trying to do. Second is critical thinking into long-term development. Third, the idea is to get participatory engagement with regards to the stakeholders. And fourth, as I said, shaping the future through policy intervention and creation. Now, our output that MIGHT has done is typically two. It could be either exploratory, the use of foresight could be exploratory, or second, it will be prescriptive. Exploratory, well, I think for the last few weeks, you've gone through the process. Exploratory, where we come up with scenarios, strategic white papers, commentaries, or articles. Whereas in terms of prescriptive, we do a lot of policy framework, strategic roadmaps, industrial blueprints, and strategic white papers. And I'll leave it at that, and perhaps we could have further conversation about this. Thank you.
For sure, our discussion later would revolve more around that. Thank you so much, Rushdie. Go ahead, Luke.
Hi, guys. I would divide what I can put on the table in terms of what I do today, but what I did previously as well. So 20 years in the Singapore public sector, I was basically a futurist, maybe 20%, 50%, sometimes 100% of my bandwidth, but I think always in future-oriented portfolios. Some of them I think what we are talking about in terms of the foresight to strategy and application piece as well. So I'll talk in broad terms about that. And then today at Cornucopia, basically we are a future readiness consultancy with a center of gravity in food systems and broadening to food, energy, water, cities, of course, sustainability. And I happen to be a political scientist, as you mentioned, by training. So I think the geo-economic turbulence, if not transition that we're in, is also part of that. So I think, obviously, I think in-house, we do develop thoughts about the future. And then for client work, that's expressed in terms of creating scenarios, co-creating scenarios, capacitating in-house teams in foresight practices, be they governments, corporates, or private sector, or civil society, UN, international organizations. And then I think at the base fundamental level, it would be really just scanning the horizon all the time for emerging issues, signals of change that in a way percolate into these more nuanced pictures of the future. Yep.
Thank you so much, Luke. So while you advise governments on the outside, so Ms. Thea is from inside the Parliament of Estonia. So go ahead, Ms. Thea.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I really appreciate being here today and to converse with all the other panelists on this very relevant topic, foresight in practice.
Ms. Thea. Funny how sometimes technology really does not work at the very most opportune moment. All right, so I think while Ms. Thea is still connecting or experiencing technical difficulties, maybe we could proceed to you first, Karsten.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kent. It's a pleasure to be here and then to see all of you again, even though it's on Zoom. Hope to get Thea back. CIFS, we're basically a think tank working with foresight, and we're one of the oldest in the world. Was founded back in the late 60s by a former OECD General Secretary, Mr. Torkild Christensen. And actually now I am the old guy at CIFS. I've been there for 35 years. And we do foresight across sectors, across countries and cultures. And just leaving you with one reflection here in the introductory round. What we've seen over the last 10 years is that foresight used to be done by people who were not really educated within foresight. So people like us from CIFS, we came in as consultants, did what we needed to do in regards to being explorative and doing scenarios and all of that, and then left. And now today we see a much more professional field, also reflected in this panel discussion and in all the participants, where we see lots of highly educated and trained foresight people inside organizations, which is a fantastic development. So that is one of the sort of the key things we have seen. Over to you, Thea.
Yeah, say you were disconnected earlier,
Okay.
but
It was
thank
just
feel free.
out of a sudden. I was just thrown out of the session. I don't know how it happened. Anyway, good to be back. Yeah, so I would go on with the introduction of where I work and what I do. So I'm heading the Foresight Center at the Estonian Parliament. So our reality check in terms of the impact of the work that we do is that whether our insights and messages actually influence the Estonian policy making. And well, for the context, Estonia is one of the rare countries where foresight is a public function. So we have a Foresight Act in Estonia, and it says that we need to build alternative scenarios together with the risks and opportunities they might entail, and that the Foresight Center is basically the gravity center to fulfill. We have the obligation to carry out the task that is stipulated in the Foresight Act. This does not mean that all the other parties cannot do foresight, of course, if they have motivation and understanding for this, but we need to do this. So our main client is the Parliament. So we need really to get the parliamentarians using the information that we produce. And this is basically easier said than done. The start was hard. You know, the Parliament members, they are very busy people. And there's always someone trying to get their attention and trying to lobby for their particular case. So they are very distracted, very busy, and there's no chance that they take part of a half-a-day scenario workshop. So we've had to invent methods to get them interested and to get the messages go through. So I'd be glad to open the details later on in the discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, I would also love to talk more about that later, Ms. Thea. But I think your setup here at Estonia is very different. I don't think there is the same setup where foresight is the home of foresight in government is at the parliament or at the legislature, at least in Asia, from what I know. So definitely all of us here at the panel, including my organization, really represents like distinct models of foresight practice. We have an industry government partnership. We have a parliamentary foresight institution, right? 2 independent futures think tanks. And then we have, of course, in Asia and here in Europe. So with our different mandates, we have different constituencies, different institutional settings, and it allows us, I guess, to examine how foresight takes shape across government, industry, research, etc. So I would like to begin our discussion today with our respective organizations' institutional purpose and entry point in foresight, because each of our organization entered the field of foresight from a different institutional position. I think, Karsten, you mentioned a while ago about the professionalization, right, of foresight. So what need, problem, or strategic ambition led your organization to adopt foresight and futures thinking, or how it was established, right? And how has that original purpose shaped the kind of foresight work that you undertake today? So I guess we'll start with Rushdie again.
As Paul as Carsten was mentioning the organization, Mike was created in 1993 actually to support our Vision 2020 at the time. So part of our mandate was actually to do foresight, although that at that time a lot of the conversation was in the area what we call prospecting rather than foresight. So because the term foresight was not yet sexy at the time. So we built capacity in the 90s from Shell. Actually, so a lot of our people was actually trained with Shell, and in fact, the first scenario exercise that we've done was actually we get a lot of number of Shell professionals to be part of our scenario exercise. And since then, as I said, we've built a capacity in terms of internally and across some of the public sector institutions to do what we're trying to do. But what I'd like to point out is simply this. I think one, there's no one size fits all approach with regards to building the foresight capacity and capability, because the needs and requirements differs from one country to one country, or from one organization or one organizations. So I think although the approach could be similar, but the needs and demand of foresight could be different. So although I like the fact that what you're mentioning is actually we could learn from each other, but you can't simply duplicate it into your country or your institution, because at the end of the day, from my experience, I've been doing this for 20 years. There's going to be three things involved: leadership, structures, and systems. Whereby leadership, without the leadership, the catalyst for foresight is just going to be a theoretical exercise. So this is something that we focus on here. And of course, there's going to be a structure required. Without structure, foresight is easily dismantled. And I like the fact that Estonia has a foresight act, and this is something that we in Malaysia do not have. However, we do have a system with regards to whereby foresight is not being done in isolation, so that the systems allow us to reach the decision maker. So I think as country to country, institution to institution, these three elements would come into play: leadership, structure, and systems, and how that could be done.
Yeah, thank you, Rushdie. So I guess I would like to ask Ms. Thea next. So coming from the government in Malaysia to government in Estonia. So could you tell us more about how the organization was established and how that original purpose of establishing this Foresight Center, right, shape the work that you do today?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, indeed. The Foresight in Estonia actually has two different stories in two decades, previous decades. So that first, there was a period where Foresight was done and mandated for detecting the emerging business opportunities. So the foresight was carried out by an institution called Estonian Development Fund, and they were basically the state venture capital organization. So they funded new promising companies, science-based, deep tech-based, IT-based, what are they? And they needed the foresight information to basically being able to find and select the pipelines. So this was the first 10 years. But unfortunately, there was a strong kind of misunderstandings and unfortunate things going on. So the fund was liquidated and the foresight got homeless. And then it was redesigned and instituted to the parliament, under the auspices of parliament, and said that the foresight is now to inform the policy making, the socio-economic policy making in particular. Perhaps, for example, in defense and security issues, it's pretty normal for every country that there is this early warning system and the horizon scanning for the purpose. But for the socio-economic policies, this was not the case. And it was perceived, or it was kind of the policymakers and assembled, and they were, well, basically there were of course a couple of enthusiasts, not all of them, but the enthusiasts were strong enough to say that we need to have this early noticing system also in the socio-economic fields. So this was the pretext basically for the Foresight Center for the last 10 years.
It's a very interesting road towards establishing a Foresight Center, but glad Estonia was able to eventually mobilize itself. Yeah, thank you, Ms. Thea. Moving ahead to Luke, especially coming from the private sector.
Okay, so let me talk about Singapore's journey in a nutshell first. I think we are a small, improbable country, and at our full independence in 65 from Malaysia, actually. Hi, Rushdie. I think we set out very deliberately, decisively on a path to globalize, to develop. So welcoming in multinational corporations when many newly independent countries were shunning it. So I think implicitly and already in our historic DNA as a place where it had been a trading port for many centuries before that, having a sense of what's over the horizon in the world was key. not just for success, but for survival. So with that mentality, I think it was quite natural that we benchmarked with Shell also, but with others to absorb the foresight method back in the 1980s. And it actually began to be practiced first in the Defense Ministry, no guesses why, but soon after it got absorbed at a whole of government level under our mega ministry, the Prime Minister's office, where today the Center for Strategic Futures, the mothership of foresight in the public sector, sits. And so anticipating change to stay relevant is very much big into the DNA, of the public sector with various foresight methods I can elaborate on later. And then now talking about my own consultancy, because obviously it's my decision to leave and to create such a thing. I think very quickly I found myself very attracted to futures because if we talk about the futures triangle as a device by way of explaining it, I'm a historian and political scientist. So historians look at the weight of the past, maybe both as a burden, but I think as a ballast as well. And then social scientists, including political scientists, problematize and create models around what's going on around us. So with that base already of education and with future-focused portfolios, very much looking at visions of the future, squaring them away through a process, maybe democratic process, and then bringing them somewhere to reality and coherence. Was very much, I guess, part of my DNA, not just what I want to get paid to do, but what I'm passionate and intellectually excited about. So that was the basis of starting my foresight practice in that sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and even though Cornucopia is like a young organization compared, I guess, to CIFS here, you've done a lot of projects already. So congratulations to and lastly, Karsten, go ahead.
Yeah, good to hear. And just referring back to what Thea said, we are so envious in Denmark of the Estonian setup because we have this weird situation in Denmark where we have lots of foresight initiatives, and we're starting to see also driven by CIFS interest in academia and at universities, but this, I don't know how to phrase it. This urgency of the future is simply difficult to establish in Denmark when it comes to parliament, government, not necessarily the big companies or the big unions. We're heavily unionized here in Denmark. They have actually been on this together with CIFS explorative path towards the future scenarios and all of that. But we still have a struggle both at CIFS and in Denmark to getting foresight institutionalized. And one of my frustrations is a big word, but one of the things where I go is that sometimes I feel, at least in the Nordics, we need a good crisis to get moving. And that is, for me, super frustrating. Why would you need a crisis to do foresight? Why shouldn't we all try to explore and create better futures for our citizens? And we're working on that hard, and we are not succeeding 100%.
Yeah, the Philippines could definitely relate, Karsten, to what you mentioned. Even though foresight has been around for since the 1990s, really, it like gathered into a movement here in the Philippines because of the COVID-19 pandemic, and that's when we were introduced to foresight, and then we started, also like building the capacity here in the Philippines so that we're able to share, so that we could be able to like organize our country as well, so that we don't wait for the crisis anymore, right? Because the goal of foresight, of course, is to be proactive before those crises even arrive. So just to take a step back, and from how our respective organizations were founded, we're also curious about how your organization select your foresight agenda. How do your respective organizations like determine which issues, which sectors, or policy questions deserve your foresight attention? Because of course there's so many sectors that serve attention, right? So, how do you decide that agenda? Who participates in setting the agenda, and what is there a criteria that helps you distinguish from a genuinely strategic long-term issue from a conventional like research concern or a conventional planning concern? So I would like to start, I guess, with Miss Taya.
Yeah, thank you. Is it okay if I have a small comment to continue the previous one? Because
Sure. No
I
worries
mean,
at all.
yeah, because and then come to the agenda setting. First, I mean, Karsten, I just have to be very straightforward and say that I don't think that in the current moment the setup of Foresight Center at the Parliament would be possible anymore. This was a very fortunate timing when the development fund got liquidated and there was the budget. Basically, the budget was there. It was just there was a need to kind of find a new home and new to find new leaders to take up this function. And it was a very fortunate moment in Estonia where the economy had been growing for I don't know, 10, 15 years. There were no kind of, the budget funding was not tight. Later on, we've seen budgetary cuts, and right now we are facing many cuts. So I don't think that creating such a function based on public funding would be possible today. So this was a really fortunate moment, and fortunately, we could really, or there was a good use of it. And another thing that the crisis is needed to actually start moving. For example, we've researched the sustainability of healthcare in Estonia 5 years ago, even when we started 10 years ago, and there is a strong need to redesign the funding because the current funding is not sustainable. And no one has done anything about it. It's just talk, talk, talk. So my conclusion is that it needs to be much worse before it can actually get better, or before the unpopular decisions will be made. In our case, we launched an idea for, or a call for topic ideas every autumn in the Parliament, in the parliamentary factions. And also throughout the years, we pay a lot of attention and be very attentive to what the commissions, for example, say, and where are the bottlenecks in their work. And when we, like 10 to 15 times yearly, we go to parliamentary committees presenting our findings, presenting kind of discussing our reports, and then we also pick up the topic ideas from there. So we get a long list out of all this, and then we have a foresight council, which is a 5-person body, really non-political, very distinguished persons appointed by the president and by academia and so forth. So they come together, and together with them, we decide upon the shortlist for the next year. So this is how it works in our case.
That's a very interesting process. So there's a body that decides amongst the huge list of issues, right, that needs to be prioritized for the next year.
Indeed, the idea is to have this neutral and non-political view upon the long list that we've attained from the Parliament, from different MPs or committees or factions. So we need kind of an ambition there to select from all the ideas from the long list.
Thank you, Ms. Saya. Is that the same case in Malaysia, Rushdie, in terms of agenda setting?
I'd just like to pick up what Karsten was mentioning just now with regards to waiting for crisis. Whereas in Malaysia, what we're trying to do is actually we believe, especially at MIT, I believe that people move not when they see the light, but when they feel the heat. So a lot of our foresight communications is rather than stressing on the oh wow moments, pardon my language, we stress on the oh shit moments, So the idea is, so then people will react and start, moving about. So hence, I think this goes back to how we communicate foresight the narrative that we choose. Hence, that is how we do things. And this goes back to our agenda setting. In mind, there's two types. We have what we call our advice is either one, solicited, where the government, the powers that be, ministries will, and you take a look at this and tell us what needs to be done, or unsolicited, where we actually, this is something that we want to do. We convince the government to let us do this due to the fact that from the science, our conversations. So typically, because Mike is a technology think tank, we do a lot of industry development, technology impact, and disruptions, new areas of growth. So that's our, I would say that's the boring part of our work. But the fun part of our work is actually instigate conversation because of the signals we see. For example, yesterday we just launched our report, Futures According to Women. And this is not something that we're supposed to do because we're a technology think tank, but because due to the fact that we see trends with regards to our fertility rate is down, women in the workplace, everything's that all these signals coming together. So we decided, let's do this. And yesterday we brought on board the Minister of Women, Community and Family Development in Malaysia. So we just give it a go and launch the report. So hence, it's as I said, it comes two ways: solicited and unsolicited. So that's how we do things here.
Yeah, thank you, Rushdie. I'm yet about to read your The Futures of the Woman, but I was able to read your earlier publication on about nuclear energy in Malaysia, and it was very interesting because it also so many of the analysis I think also can apply to the Philippines. But now hearing from the perspectives of agenda setting from the public sector, we'd also like to hear how the agenda setting works in think tanks and consulting firms. So, Karsten, how do you set the agenda in CIFS?
Yeah, thank you. And like the other panelists, just going back to the previous speaker, Rusty, would be fantastic if you could share that report with us on the future of women. Is that possible? Great. We would look forward to that. Yeah, at CIFS, the agenda setting, it's a little bit of a mixture because we are a standalone think tank. We have an independent board with board members from 3 or 5 countries, and we don't get funding from any kind of public system. So every year, my CEO, she starts with a zero, so to speak. And this means that the agendas we are supporting is probably 80% client driven, and that is from the big American tech companies to small Danish childcare institutions to the Asian Development Bank. We work heavily with ASEF, etc., etc. So from our side, there's a board discussion and a CEO-led driven discussion on would there actually be themes, topics, or organizations that we would not like to be associated with. And that is, of course, a very difficult discussion, and it's difficult, as you all can imagine. But as I said, we work globally. And then maybe 20% of our activities is driven by our board saying we would like to support X. And what we are trying to support right now is increasing the voice of young people in foresight discussions. We do that through our partnership with ASEF. And then, being a Danish think tank, obviously we have a lot of Danish small-scale programs trying to support and get these voices heard, both in an institutional setting, but also in sort of more everyday life at the local high school. How can we make sure that not only the voices of young people are heard, but also inside organizations? All organizations is driven by management and high achievers and people with lots of energy and passion for a topic. And one of my questions is actually, and that's to all of us here today, is how do we get all the passive people to interact in these processes? The people that are just, at high school or at work or being a citizen in any of our countries, going about the daily routines, and they will still be affected by future trends and scenarios, but they don't have a voice. So if any of you have a suggestion for that, let me know.
Yeah, thank you, Carson. I think first of all, this is a very good platform for that because this is the ASEF Young Leaders Summit, right? Yeah, but we agree with you, especially here in the Philippines, that you know we need to capacitate also or like increase the future's literacy of the youth because they will inherit or we will inherit the future, right? That that's still being shaped. So I would like to ask also the agenda setting question to Luke
Yep.
for cornucopia. How does it work? Because as I understand, you're also similar to CIFS that you have, aside from Singapore projects, you are also now in the region and more increasingly globally.
Sure. Okay, a word on Singapore first. I think, well, let me talk about Korea. I'm not an expert there, but I did some reading up. And I think each country may have a certain journey or lack of a journey into foresight. So I think for Korea, back when they were not a democracy, but they were, a development-oriented state, I believe their initial foresight function in the 60s started off being a lot of tech foresighting to see how they should industrialize, the most impactful paths of industrialization. But from there they've evolved into a bit more of like a congress and executive system. So I think that congress also has a foresight outfit. In my country, I think some of the more ideological people in the founding generation of leaders, again with the deliberate decision to globalize, also had the foresight that we need to prepare the whole of society, not just economically, but looking at socially, culturally, spiritually, ideologically, even. So I think that was the basis for a really rounded scenario type of method. Then for me, I feel a bit embarrassed as an Asian to keep on talking about my practice since I'm trying to illustrate what a consultancy firm would do. But so let me give you a bit of a broader frame, I think, for foresight agenda. Number one, there's a pull, right? Let's say if the boss, be it the client or your secretary or whoever, is very interested in something. And in a way, that's very often the starting point, right? He who has the goal makes the rules, he who has the power makes the rules. But then I think there's also push. Be you a foresight unit, a consultant, or whoever, you may be pushing certain ideas, maybe for a mixed agenda, including hopefully you believe in it. But I think there's other P's that are important. So P's like perceive. What do you honestly see out there? Before you're just crowding the field with preconceptions. And then that also requires some space to ponder. And that's where maybe academics and to an extent government futurists may have an advantage over people who have a zero budget every year and needing to do that. And that comes to the last P that I think is in vogue, and I think if done well, it's more than just a gesture, participatory. So to what extent are we reaching out to stakeholders affected by our notions of the future to engage with them in it? I think lastly, again, this sense of needing to do foresight can either come out of a time of great chaos or a time of stability, where there's a sense among enlightened people that we need to self-disrupt. So I think that would be a kind of broader frame where I think all the different actors can fit in.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I think that's also a good synthesis of everyone's answers to the question. It can come from our partners, it can come from us, it can come from the environment that we operate in. And I think over time, we also really found this, this trend of making foresight more participatory because I think for the past, it is more of like a technical work, right? The scanning the scenarios. It was reserved to like professionals and technical specialists. But now there is a push for it to really be more participatory, engage more stakeholders, especially the youth. And it also relates back to what Ms. Thea shared earlier that, foresight not only for defense or security purposes, but for socioeconomic. And we've seen it in the projects that Rashdi mentioned, the futures of women, and Karsten mentioned bringing more youth into the foresight work. So I guess I would like to ask one last question before we open it up to our participants. So, very interested on, is there any resistance or institutional barriers that your organization usually faces or you encountered when introducing or sustaining foresight? Because while we would while we would like to think that foresight is a neutral work, but when we do apply it, we encounter these challenges, whether it's their political, organizational, cultural. What are these challenges that you've faced, and how has your organization responded? Maybe we can start with Karsten this time.
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. Because we do face resistance. One thing we see when it comes to resistance, and this is mainly from our clients in the sort of the client portfolio, the 80% of what we do at CIFS, is that organizations will tend to say, but we already do foresight. We have a strategy department, we have a branding committee, we have whatever kind of team that are sort of involved with scanning insights and signals, etc., etc., etc. So we are actually faced with that challenge, not often, but many times per year, that organizations think that they do foresight without doing foresight. So that's one sort of resistance. Another is actually to, and now I've talked about the voices of young, and I think we all agree here. So let's spice it up a little bit. One of the things, and this is maybe not necessarily resistance, but you need to get people at the table at the foresight process that have the power to make decisions. I mean, I have probably, as many of you, I've done rather a lot of scenarios where we had great results, we had a good process, workshops, questionnaires, Delphi surveys, whatever. And then it kind of fizzled out because the people responsible for making the choices were not part of the scoping process. They don't have to be part of all the workshops and the standard process, but they were simply not part of the scoping process. So that's why just one example, and to those of you who have met me before, you might remember that I work a lot for the Swedish furniture retailer IKEA. It's been my biggest client for 25 years, and I still remember the first project I did for the IKEA universe, and of course highly commercial, nothing to do with young people and voices and all of that, highly commercial. But the first big project we did back in the zeros was for the finance and administration people, because in IKEA, the global CFO at that time, he said, and I still remember that so vividly, he said, if I don't get my finance people, my CFOs, to open up their eyes and see the multitude of scenarios facing a company like IKEA, nothing will happen, because CFOs, they will just say no to the future. They would like to save money and focus on costs and all of that. So if the mindset of the people with the money is not changed, nothing will happen in IKEA. And I've taken that saying with me for the last 25 years. It's not resistance per se, but it's something that is super important.
Yeah, that's very relatable, Karsten. We've also done several workshops here in the Philippines where the decision maker is absent, and therefore because foresight like entails this like change of mindset. It's a very different mindset compared to ordinary the normal strategy work. So when you do present them with the outputs of the foresight work, but they were not part of the process, it's harder to grasp because obviously there are these more urgent challenges. These are like on your table, and the results of the foresight work are long term or more long term. So I think that's also like brings us back to the point earlier about making it really participatory and making sure the decision maker is there throughout the process. Rushdie, is that the same? Are those the same challenges for you, or what have you faced throughout your work at Mind?
I think that is a similar issues that we have. Hence, we in any of the foresight work that we do is always we start off by doing a scoping with regards to power interest grid. People with a lot of power have no interest. People with a lot of interest have no power. So finding the right balance has always been a challenge. But it's case by case basis. But because we're in the government, one of the things that I face a lot is actually I'm just gonna talk about three things. One is the fact that I deal with politicians. So it is always about low-hanging fruits and quick wins, one election cycle thinking. So the idea is how do I build narrative that it could survive 2 or 3 elections, for example. So that's one challenge that we face. Second is always this. I think capability to anticipate does not equate to willingness to act. Sometimes we present with regards to okay, this is something that we anticipate, this is the future that we see coming, but whether these that they have the stomach or the will to act on certain things. So hence again building the right narrative again. And the third is always with regards to from scenarios to strategy to action. Some of our work involved whereby we're engaged to build scenarios, but translating these scenarios into strategy and actions also will take a bit of time. So I'm going to leave it at this. These are the three things, the challenges that typically we're going to face, but I'm not going to say that it's always difficult, but these are some of the, it also, hence, we are anticipating these are going to be the challenges. So we already built strategy around them. But these are the three things I'm just going to touch. Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to probe a bit, Rashidi. Given that I think amongst all the foresight institutions I have encountered so far, MITE is very distinctive in the sense that it is a link between the industry and the government. How is that collaboration between the industry and the government, or is it particularly challenging with that kind of setup?
It provides us with a distinct advantage. We can become the government if we deal with the industry, and we can become the industry's voice when we deal with the government. So this hybrid work allows us to actually move seamlessly across the sector. So hence, I think one of the things I like to stress about creating trust, that conversations that is there that you create allows people to understand that the conversation that you create will go somewhere rather than a talk shop. So we're very careful with regards to curating some of the work that we do to not just become so stakeholders are aware that okay, if the conversation is happening in MITE, two things could happen. One, we're not going to name names in terms of who says what, but it's going to be a collective voice. One. Second is very much with regards to, the conversation is going to be pushed to the relevant ministries, powers that be, so that, consideration could be made, actions, although I wish some of these action could be faster, but at least there will be, the word I always use, to instigate the futures. So hence, that's what we try to do.
It's a very interesting dual character, Maito. Thanks, Rashdi. How about you, Luke? What you have encountered in your work? What challenges have you encountered throughout your foresight work? Whether that be in cornucopia or where you were still in working for government, also doing foresight.
Okay, I think the challenge in a way is what is beyond the pull, what is beyond what the senior management is asking for. So in the first instance, I think be it a CEO, a board, or government context officials, you need to show that you're listening to the client, right? So appreciate. And so at the inception, it would be to even when you frame, let's say, the focal question for a scenario, make sure that you're doing this social listening at the apex of the organization, but make sure you're listening to the whole of the organization, including the outcasts, the people who are leaving, the next generation, and also the stakeholders in the organization, and even people who, especially people who have a problem with the organization or very contrary views or agenda in that sense. So I think what Rushdi mentioned about, the interest mapping, power mapping, and you've got to kind of have a counterweight as well, because I think to do a good job as a futurist is really to tell people what they don't know, to uncover, mental blocks, use futures, assumptions that are past their sell-by date. So then that would be the second part. What value can you bring in from external perspectives across the pestle or whatever mnemonic you use? And quite often, with due respect for might, I think technology, everyone agrees is decisive, right? Everyone's grappling with AI, but often it's the nexus between that and some of the other factors: social, political, cultural, ideological, and so on. So I think it's, to show the value and relevance of all this cool stuff, but first by bringing the client along already, but then bringing them to that place where it melds with their concerns. So like one person told me, when you do scenarios, maybe one scenario really should be the official view of the future. And as long as, the officials aren't dumb, it probably makes sense, other things being equal, but then you can peel away with different variables, various assumptions coming from, the contextual environment in that sense. So I think that, regardless of whether you're in government or consultant, whoever, in the end, it's having the shrewdness, the way to read things, and the EQ. Not that I'm an EQ champion, but to kind of bring that along. It's too easy to be a caught futurist if you just give people what they want, and but by the time that may go awry, you'll probably be gone and they'll be gone as well. So who cares?
Yeah, I agree with you, Luke. Definitely, it's very important to communicate the value of the foresight work. And I think that's what I love about Singapore, because you do communicate your scenarios. I think even before, right? When I was still early in the foresight community, I learned about the scenarios from Singapore. You communicate your driving forces and even do campaigns to, to share these foresight work with the people, because otherwise, it will remain in our offices and not really relate to the citizens or whoever our clients are.
Okay, sorry, just
Last,
very quickly
go
on
ahead.
that, just to clarify, I think Singapore does national scenarios, but those are typically kept confidential.
Yeah.
So they can be honest about, very controversial things that in the public domain might, concern various stakeholders. But I think like the driving forces are most of the driving forces are regularly shared in the public domain. You can go there. I think one last point to make is that it seems to me to make sense if, maybe there should be whole of nation scenarios, not just whole of government, but whole of nation. But they shouldn't be a vice preventing specific thematic or sectoral or ministry family scenarios. And then lastly, as a counterweight to just this national thinking, I think one thing the EU does, maybe Carsten and Tia have a view on whether they do it well, is they have may dilute or be an offset to certain weird thoughts at national levels, and so in fact, personally, I hope that our region, Southeast Asia, ASEAN, also does that as well, to kind of inspire and provoke the conversation at individual member state level.
Yeah, agree with you, Luke. Maybe Rushdie and you and us here at the Philippines can start, connecting ASEAN level futurists. Yeah, but lastly, I'm very interested to hear also about the challenges encountered by Ms. Thea in your work at the especially being housed in the parliament, already having the Foresight Act to legitimize your mandate, but communicating this foresight work to the lawmakers and the decision makers.
Yeah, thanks. It has been a really wonderful discussion so far. I picked up quite many things. Well, I just wonder, why can't you be really honest if you work non-confidentially, if you work openly to the public? Because this is what we do. We try to create as lot of fuss over our findings in media as we probably can, to really initiate the public discussion about the risks and opportunities, for the politicians to give first the push to start thinking about these issues. Perhaps they did not do so previously, and also kind of to get an understanding of the attitudes of the general public via this public discussion going on the risks and opportunities. So the politicians have much stronger grounds to come up with some remedies or some prevention measures if there has been a widespread public discussion before. So this is the case in Estonia, and we would be very intrigued to know why do you think that you can only be honest when working in a confidential setting. Yeah, but perhaps a few comments, and then we could. I'd be really intrigued to go deeper in this. But as of the barriers, and the main barrier in case of our work has been the lack of interest from the parliament members. So once the center was set up, well, great, we have the center, but it is not a guarantee that everyone really carefully goes through the reports and ponders about the insights. No, that's not the case. They are very busy people. They are distracted people. So we've basically done two things. One relates very well what Karsten said before, that let the money do the talking, or track it down to money. Whether it's then the state budget or then the subsistence of the citizens, of the voters, basically, how they are coping in the potential futures, how they are coping in being confronted with different trends. So we've used the quantification of scenarios. So to really attach numbers to different scenarios. It is, of course, hypothetical. It is numerical simulations. We need to be very clear about the assumptions we've used in the calculations, but basically creating hypothetical data, kind of speculative data about the future, not just one set of data, but various sets of data based on different assumptions. And then if it comes down to how the budgetary affairs are related to some trends, how the subsistence of the people is affected by different trends and scenarios, then the politicians start taking you seriously. So this has been our first experience and stronghold. And another one, as I already mentioned, go via media to the policymakers. So if we can attract interest in journalists, so for example, there is a radio emission and the politician is asked by a journalist. The Foresight Center has pointed that there's a widening inequality in the education in Estonia. It is a kind of emerging trend. So what is your response to this? What is the response of your party to this emerging issue? So they really need to start paying attention to our work, right? So this has been kind of a boomerang method to actually get to the policymakers, to the parliament members.
That's a very interesting approach of Thea. Not only you force the decision makers to be confronted with the issue at hand. We're also educating the public about these kinds of futures issues. So I guess we already had a very substantive discussion so far. I would like to now start raising the questions from our participants. So we have a few here in the chat box. So this one from Boom Jombek. So can foresight be used to predict revolutions or uprisings? Given that a couple of Asian countries recently went through regime change driven by young people. And this is, I think, related to a question as well from Alice on the role of deliberative democracy have in the pursuit of futures thinking successfully. So who would like to start the discussion rolling about foresight and democracy and the all of these destabilizations or uprisings that are inherently present in democratic countries.
If
yes,
I may
ahead.
to start with the first remark, and then the others can follow. So basically, this is what I'm doing my PhD thesis upon, but it's in a very early stage yet. But the inclusive foresight has a promise, and there's a strong promise that if people are engaged already in the process of framing the issue, not just that picking among potential solutions or remedies, but they are really engaged in framing the issues, kind of identifying the problem in the first place. So this has a kind of, it's very promising as a remedy for having more people say in the democratic processes also afterwards, when the options are presented and then the options are kind of on sale, different parties offering different options. So for this stage, they have already gathered and accumulated the understanding of what it's all about and how they feel and relate to this. So therefore, the inclusive foresight methods have a lot of potential.
Yeah, thank you, Taya. I think in relation to like inclusion and participation, we've also read about CIFS Futures Barometer, right, Karsten, where you are directly asking citizens on their outlook of the future. And we have a similar effort in the Philippines as well, so that, the thinking process of, or the anticipation of what can happen in the future does not belong only to like foresight specialists, but really it should be like we call it futures literacy, right? So that everyone can have it. But yeah, does anyone also want to answer about young people and futures of deliberative democracy? Go ahead, Karsten.
Yeah, maybe we can just add a little bit about the futures barometer, because indeed we've seen some results in Europe saying that the outlook of young people is rather bleak at the moment, and I do think this involvement in sort of framing the questions and feeling acknowledged and heard is a big part of this. On the other hand, I would say, and just to be absolutely transparent, I haven't read the report yet, only the headlines, but the UN just published a report on how young people across the world are perceiving the future. And one of the data points I saw yesterday, it's brand new, was actually that if you ask young people, what is your position on the future? Is it positive or negative, sort of at large? There's a very, very big geographical division of the world, and actually, Europe and Asia, we are at the bottom. When you ask young people, according to the UN, in especially Western Europe, Eastern Europe, and Asia, they have a rather negative outlook on the future. And then going to the rest of the world, the Americas, and Africa, and the southern part of Asia, it's more optimistic. There's something not right, and I do think, Tia, you're so right. It's about being heard and being acknowledged, and that is our struggle. I'm certainly not an expert on political systems in Asia, but in Europe, that is part of the struggle at the moment. They don't feel heard, and if you're not heard to begin with, why would you try to find a good solution if you feel no one listens?
That's a very interesting. I would like to read that also after this webinar. And I think there's someone here, Alice, who shared in the chat that in Australia, there was a youth-led national survey asking young people how hopeful they are about the future, and it scored for over 10. So I think this is a really pressing, issue for our time, and how we're able to be more inclusive, especially towards the youth. Last week, we also introduced Foresight and Futures Thinking to a Young Leaders Program here at the Philippines, organized with the DAP. And they were change makers and leaders among within themselves as well. So they appreciated foresight, but understand that it's there is this feeling of helplessness, I guess, towards the future, because you are inheriting a planet with that's already facing climate change, already all of these geopolitical tensions. So, and you are not part of all of this, but you are inheriting it. So I think that's where the perspective mainly comes. But also, I guess what I've learned, I guess, from foresight and futures thinking throughout the past is it's not only for us to really know more about the future, but to understand that we have agency in shaping it. Because after you do scenarios, that you don't end in scenarios, right? You end in strategies and actions, so that you're able to shape, the kind of future that you want. We have a question here addressed to Luke. So, Luke, you mentioned about outcasts, people leaving, and those with contrary views. So, how do you practically get those voices into a foresight process when they're usually excluded? And it's related to another question here about participatory foresight more than just a gesture, because how do we move from participation to co-ownership?
Yes. Okay. And there was also a question about science versus people from other backgrounds. So I think that, the devil's in the detail of the design of the process. Okay. So, but the general principle is easy to say is make sure that you consider all stakeholders, not just those convening, paying for it, and with the power as well. Because they'll get their money's worth if you can really approach all these voices, So I think some more practical ways would be to have participatory approaches in it, such as, having focus groups or even, just using your informal social networks to reach out and tap other perspectives. So I think here is where I have to be real with you all, and say, I think that foresight can be too elite activity, but how much should it be democratized? I think the people running the process should be professional futurists with good, rigorous background in foresight, but working with other talented and passionate people who may not be professional futurists, but with a lot of value to bring to the table. So public sentiment, including of the marginalized or whatever we're talking about, is important, but again, we shouldn't sentimentalize that as the compass of your takeaways, but it's important. So it should be given due weight and due consultation, Otherwise, that can become a gesture as well. And again, to what extent are your actual findings and actions serving them, So it's about the design and it's about professional coordination of the process to deliver true value. So there is also an instrumental role for foresight that I think people in the public sector are well aware of. Good politics is also good policy. Sometimes doing foresight, the optics of it are also important and not to be trivialized as long as they are being used for a good purpose. But who judges that, right? Ultimately, the electorate judges that, and the elected government of the day is responsible for how it conducts things, including its foresight activities.
Yeah, thank you. Look, definitely. I think I agree with you that the devil is in the details, and it's not just about who is on the table, right? But how the workshop itself is it designed? Is it inclusive? Because if sometimes foresight workshops can be very technical. So if you involve people with non-technical backgrounds, or in our case, for example, like farmers and fishermen, and other workers, you need to make sure that the language is inclusive, that the discussion is accessible so that everyone can meaningfully participate. Yeah, so we have a question here also addressed to Ms. T, but I think everyone can chime in also that you earlier mentioned about confidentiality in terms of how knowledge and impact could be shared. So it seems to prepare one specific area, such as Singapore, which you also shared earlier, Luke. But the results might spill over to a larger region or even globally. So how would you increase scenario planning and futures thinking on a larger scale, or would expanding it too broadly remove its purpose?
Thank you for the question. Well, it's pretty tough one, because what works in one country does not or is not a safe bet in another country. So you really need to do the foresight in a way that is best rooted in your institutional and democratic or the other traditions, governance traditions, basically. So you cannot just take one model and impose it to many other countries, regardless of what has been their previous development tracks and prevailing governance systems. So this is perhaps the first point. Another point, perhaps, that how to get well, of course. Well, I would like to relate to the previous discussion about the agency of the young people, because they are the ones who we would like to be engaged in scenario thinking the most, and also be rather later on active to act upon the knowledge and the foresight information. So one thing is that we have not yet discussed about the digital means and the digital environments where our young people live today mostly. Lots and lots of hours in a day they spend there. So, and this digital environment, the setting, this has basically double or different kind of versatile effects. There are some youngsters who get a lot of extra agency and empowerment from this being there in the digital environments, perhaps using the AI for whatever they want to achieve in their studies or in their work. And then there's a lot of others who feel discouraged, who feel stuck in echo chambers. Perhaps they are not really feeling it, but they are stuck in the echo chambers where the pessimism and the kind of hopelessness is then shared, and probably governments are being blamed as incompetent, etc., etc. So we need to first acknowledge that the digital environments work differently for different sets of youngsters. And so we really first I would say there is a need for more regulation for the digital environments. Of course, there have been ideas of social media bans. This is very popular nowadays to discuss about whether we should ban social media. It's not, I mean, that is kind of something that politicians can show afterwards that we've done something, we've banned it, but basically it's not working. Everyone can get around the corner, still have an access. So how do we make sure the digital environments really work for increasing the agency of the people and not depressing it? So this is a big question to me, and also the foresight. A lot of participatory foresight and inclusive foresight you can nowadays do in digital environments, involving much more people from different age groups than you previously could do this. So this might be some leeway perhaps to think about, and kind of further thinking. Last remark about involvement of the youth. Nowadays, at least in Western countries, we kind of involve. We have the representative organizations of the youth, and they are even at the table. If they are lucky, they are at the table, for example, in environmental discussions, and so on and so forth. But the question is whether their voice really counts. Are their points taken seriously? Will they enter into the next phase of preparing the steps and measures? So we see a very unfortunate trend, which we call the youth washing. So there are the organizations at the table, but their views, their standpoints are taken as well naive, immature. So they had their say in, and now they should be happy, and let's forget about what they said. So this seems to be a really dangerous trend that we really need to cope. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thea. It also, I think it goes back to the point earlier about meaningful participation, right? That you're not only inviting them, the youth, for the sake of invitation or for the sake of their participation, but really for them to meaningfully engage and act on what was being discussed afterwards, because that would then give them agency, that would give them the decision-making ability, right, to shape the work that should be done. I'm also curious, Rushdie, about this earlier discussion on transparency and confidentiality, and as well as participatory foresight in your work in MITE, given that your main mandate is to really connect industry and government. But how about the society at large when you do your foresight work? Actually, you're still on mute. Let me try if I can help.
Okay, sorry about that. Well, I think it in terms of confidentiality, it really depends on who you're working with, isn't it? I think as far of look, for example, if he's working for a client with regards to doing foresight for competitive intelligence, those are something that could not be shared. I think the same goes for Carsten. If he's working for IKEA, this foresight work could not be shared. But as far as if the foresight work is in terms of trying to get everybody into the same boat, trying to same picture, trying to a shared vision of the future, those are something that you want to share because you want everybody to be on board. But one of the things that I find interesting is this: when designing the future, there's always going to be a winner and losers. So this relates back to transparency. So every future decision, whether it's about technology, whether it's about policy, environment, economy, it redistribute power, resources, and opportunities. So sometimes then we make I always have this conversation with regards to unintended consequences. So what foresight is trying to do whenever we're trying to do this is actually we don't pretend that it's trying to create a future where everybody wins equally. And this is the problem, because everybody that's getting involved in foresight thinks, hey, we're thinking about the future that where it's going to be like a very utopian kind of thing, where everybody gets walk home and be happy. Because the idea is there's always going to be winners, there's going to be losers. Incumbents going to be faced with disruptions. So but the idea is what we're trying to expose or trying to be transparent is actually we want to identify this trade-off early. And of course, we like to include diverse voices. And then again, we like to reduce the harm to the groups that's going to be losers. And design the transition to be fair and where benefits are widely shared and not concentrated. Because we do a lot of this industrial development where we see, these are some of the things, what are the vulnerable groups, who gets jobs, what are going to be the economic numbers. So, but to be fair, there's always going to be winners and losers. So as future designers or foresighters, we always ask the question, who's going to benefit? Who bears the cost? Whose voice are missing? And how do we make these transitions fair to everybody to ensure that enough time is being given so everybody could be ready? So I think to think that just because you're doing foresight that everything is going to be okay, I think it's a bit far-fetched. I think foresight is not a panacea to everything, but the idea is for us to actually have insights into the transitions as we move towards the future.
Thank you, Rashdi. And I would also like to add a bit, although not, categorically correct all the time, but I would say that, those who do the foresight work could be the winner because they are doing the advanced work already. Yeah, but I think that's all the time we have today. But just to end the session, can we have like a brief closing statements from everyone for our young leaders here today? What is one practice or responsibility or even a habit that they could develop now if they want to help their organizations become more capable in anticipating and shaping the future? So just short answers, just so we could close the session. Sir Luke, can you start us off?
Okay, just like in that unfortunate Middle East conflict where there's an unfortunate choke point, I think foresight is a choke point. Yep. So foresight is necessary but not sufficient. So we need to have definitely more youth foresight, capacitation. This session is great, but I think alongside future skills, everyone should have future skills, but everyone should have STEM, other broader knowledge. Of course, AI can help walk alongside you for that, and let that move in tandem with futures thinking. And don't wait for a government or corporate or international organization commission exercise. Go do your own scenarios as well, and then put them to these elites with your learnings and your capacitation in foresight.
Thank you, Luke. Karsten?
Agree to what Luke just said. You stole my talking points. I would say make sure to be explorative. Have the guts to talk about scenarios and insights that are both positive and negative. Also reflecting back on what Rusty said on winners and losers. So have the guts to be truly explorative. And by the way, this is fantastic. I mean, we have 90 people here taking an interest in the foresight. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Karsten. Thea?
Yeah, so much has been said already. Just to repeat that foresight's no rocket science. So the methods are quite easy to apply. And there's even no need to produce new foresight information yourself. There's so much foresight information around, just at the mouse click. Just design and set up routines to collect the foresight information that is relevant for your business, and then also design and set up the routines to regularly ponder and brainstorm over the information together with your team. So that would be my two recommendations.
Thank you, Taya. And lastly, Rushdie.
Foresight is first and foremost is about the mindset. I know they've gone through this training, tools, methods, and process to explore the future, because taking cue from what previous speakers have spoken, this can be done on a personal level, institutional level, organizational level, regional or national level. Now, if you bring that to a personal level, I would like to recommend a book called WTF, What the Foresight. It's produced in 2016 about taking foresight at a personal level, because this is about leadership, isn't it? So hence the foresight should be ingrained in these people. So try look up that book. Yep.
Thank you, Rushdie. And from my end, I think especially the youth's outlook about the future, I think it's the uncertainty that creates fear in us, because it can feel overwhelming, climate, AI, polarization, but without tools to think through the uncertainty, we may feel anxious or powerless or disengaged, but it is through foresight and futures thinking that we can have agency in shaping our preferred future. So definitely, let's all capacitate ourselves. I think all of our institutions here are offering capacity building initiatives for the youth, and as well as ASEF, through this program. So with that, I would like to turn over the mic again to Linnea, and thank you so much to everyone for the very insightful discussion. I think so much participants have learned so much, and as well as me. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Kent.
Thank you.
Thank you to all of our speakers for joining us here today. As I have been in the background now, listening in, it's been very insightful for me, as well as I'm also quite new to the topic of foresight and futures thinking. So this has been a great learning journey for myself as well throughout these past couple of weeks. So thank you all for your contributions. And to all of our participants joining us today, thank you to you as well. And to those of you who have been joining us for the past couple of weeks, we hope it has been very insightful for you to cover these different avenues of futures thinking, foresight, also technology and futures thinking. How do we adapt to the emerging technologies such as AI, both using in futures thinking itself and in foresight, but also when we're looking at the future of AI and of different technologies as well, and its impact on our environments. Of course, a huge thank you not only to Kent, but the entire team at the Development Academy of Philippines for the partnership, and to the Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies as well for your contributions to this webinar series, and of course to the program as a whole. We're very grateful for the smooth partnership and for your contributions, not only on the program development, but also on coming as speakers as well. And to those of you who have been joining us for the past couple of weeks, thank you for your engagement, for your questions, and your curiosity. And we hope that this continues into your own both personal career and professionals' careers. We here have recommendations on both sides on how you can incorporate the learnings from today and the past couple of weeks into your lives. So for those who joined at least 4 out of 6 of the webinars that we've had, we will be sending out the certificates in the coming weeks for you. For those that missed out on any of the sessions, you can catch up on the recordings on our website, and we will be sending out an email after this webinar with the links as per usual, but I'm also here sharing a bit of a summary of some links for you, not only to the recordings of the sessions from this webinar series, but also to our mailing list for those of you who are interested in more of our projects here at the Asia Euro Foundation, specifically youth projects and future opportunities that might might be available for you, either to register for similar series online, but also for other on-site projects as well. So with that being said, a final thank you. We wish you all a good rest of your day, evening, or perhaps night if you're joining us from New Zealand. But we hope to see you again in one of our future projects soon. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you, Linnea. Thanks, everyone.